The galaxy did not fear Earth, it pitied it. To the great empires that ruled the stars, Earth was nothing more than a penal world, a dumping ground for criminals, rebels, and those deemed too dangerous to live among the so-called civilized species. It had no advanced technology, no interstellar trade, no allies. The planet was a forgotten relic of a brutal decision made thousands of years ago, when the ruling powers of the galaxy sought a place to exile those they could not control. And so, Earth was chosen. They stripped the planet of its infrastructure, bombarded its major cities into ruin, and cast their prisoners down like discarded waste. Earth was meant to be a tomb. The exiles would fight amongst themselves, tearing each other apart in an endless cycle of violence and starvation. No resources, no guidance, no hope. That was the plan. But the galaxy had underestimated humanity. At first, chaos reigned. The exiled criminals, warlords, and dissidents fought bitterly over scraps. Old rivalries turned into blood feuds. The weak perished, and the strong took what they could. For decades, Earth was exactly what the galaxy expected it to be, a place of endless conflict, where the only law was survival. But something changed. Over generations, the survivors learned to adapt. They stopped fighting for scraps and started building. The remnants of old Earth, hidden bunkers, ancient knowledge, lost technology, were rediscovered and fiercely protected. Scavengers roamed the ruins, piecing together the knowledge of a forgotten age. Engineers built machines from the wreckage of old warships. Scientists preserved knowledge in underground vaults, passing it down in secret. What the galaxy had intended to be a slow death sentence instead became something else entirely. A crucible. The weak were gone. The fearful had died out. The survivors, the ones who had fought, who had endured, who had learned to work together, became something more. They were no longer exiles. They were no longer criminals. They were something new, something dangerous. By the time the galaxy remembered Earth, it was already too late. For centuries, no one had bothered to check on the prison planet. There was no need. The exiles were supposed to be dead, or at best, reduced to scavengers clawing out a miserable existence. But then, an Imperial patrol ship passing through the Sol system detected something strange. Signals, structures, a power signature where there should have been none. Confused, the Imperium sent a scout ship to investigate. It never returned. A second ship followed. It, too, vanished. Alarmed, the Imperium dispatched a battle cruiser to remind the exiles of their place. It entered orbit, broadcasting threats and demands for surrender. It was the last transmission the galaxy ever received from that ship. The empires had thought Earth was dead. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Survival on Earth was never guaranteed. It was earned. The first generations of exiles barely lasted a decade. The weak starved, the foolish were killed, and those who clung to the old ways of the galaxy were crushed under the weight of their own ignorance. The environment was harsh, the weather unforgiving, and food scarce. The empires had stripped Earth of its resources before abandoning it, ensuring that those left behind would suffer. But suffering breeds strength. The survivors learned. They adapted. Tribes formed, then settlements, then cities hidden beneath the ruins of the old world. Those who relied on brute force alone perished. The true leaders were the ones who could think beyond the next meal, beyond the next fight. Scientists and engineers were hunted, not to be killed, but to be protected. Knowledge was power, and on Earth, power meant survival. They rediscovered agriculture, rebuilt machines from scavenged parts, and reworked old technology to suit their needs. In the wastelands, hunters used weapons forged from scraps of alien metal, their armor crafted from salvaged plating. In underground bunkers, scholars pored over ancient databases, relearning the sciences lost when Earth was abandoned. In hidden workshops, mechanics built engines, studying the remnants of crashed vessels and long-dead machines. Generations passed, and what had once been a lawless wasteland became something far more dangerous, an unbroken civilization. The galaxy had forgotten about Earth, assuming the prison world would remain locked in its primitive state. But the exiles did not forget the stars. They studied the skies, mapping the orbits of passing ships, tracking their signals, learning their patterns. They deciphered alien languages, listening in on transmissions from the galactic powers that had cast them away. They learned their enemies' strengths, their weaknesses, and most of all, their arrogance. The first true breakthrough came with a crash. A damaged Drenthar scout ship, fleeing a battle on the Empire's distant borders, strayed too close to Earth's gravity well and spiraled downward. The galaxy would have expected the exiles to swarm the wreckage like scavengers, stripping it for parts. But humanity had grown beyond simple survival. They did not tear it apart. They repaired it. For months, Earth's greatest minds studied the ship in secrecy. They learned how its engines worked, how its weapons functioned, how its systems connected. When they were finished, the ship was no longer Drenthar. It was human. And it was only the beginning. More ships would fall, and each time, humanity grew stronger. Each wreckage was a lesson. Each captured system a puzzle to be solved. What had once been scattered survivors had become engineers, tacticians, and warriors, honed by generations of struggle. Earth was no longer a prison. It was a forge, and the weapons it would create would shake the stars. The galaxy still believed Earth was a graveyard. For centuries, no empire had bothered to look. To them, it was a dead world, a failed experiment, a planet of savages too broken to rise. That assumption was their greatest mistake. In the shadows of the ruins, beneath the scorched earth, in deep bunkers and hidden laboratories, humanity had built something impossible. They had taken the wreckage of fallen ships and turned it into a fleet. The first engines roared to life in secret, tested in the vast wastelands where no foreign eye could see. Scientists, once exiled for crimes of rebellion, rediscovered the lost principles of spaceflight. Engineers, once sentenced to die in the wastes, reworked alien systems with brutal efficiency. And then, one day, the sky above Earth cracked open. A ship, cobbled together from Drenthar wreckage and human ingenuity, rose from the surface, defying everything the galaxy believed about the exiles. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't sleek. But it flew. And it did not return. That first ship was a test, an experiment with a single goal: escape. It drifted beyond the atmosphere, out past the moon, and into the black abyss where no human had set foot in millennia. The crew sent no distress signals, left no transmissions. They moved in silence, mapping the void, analyzing the remains of long-abandoned orbital stations, marking the locations of ancient satellites that could be salvaged for parts. Then came the second ship, then the third. Each one better than the last, each one built with lessons learned from the failures before it. They did not rush. They did not draw attention. For years, humanity worked in the darkness, expanding their reach without the galaxy's notice. They set up secret shipyards within the asteroid belt, using hollowed-out rocks as dry docks for their growing fleet. They created listening posts, intercepting alien communications, learning everything they could about the galaxy's great empires. And then they began to take. It started with unmanned supply drones, cargo haulers that drifted too far from their routes, vanishing without a trace. The Drenthar Imperium blamed pirates. Then, it was isolated transport vessels, their crews disappearing, their ships stripped down and repurposed. The Imperium sent investigators, but they never found the culprits. Because by the time they arrived, the ships no longer looked Drenthar. They looked human. The exiles were no longer scavengers. They were predators. For every ship the Imperium lost, humanity gained another weapon. With each new vessel, they refined their tactics, testing their stolen technology, perfecting their stealth. Every captured database gave them insight into the weaknesses of the galactic powers, their ship designs, their battle formations, their supply routes. The great empires still believed Earth was a dead world. They had no idea that a storm was brewing, and when it struck, there would be no warning. The Drenthar Imperium did not see the warning signs. When their cargo ships vanished, they blamed pirates. When their patrols failed to report back, they assumed navigation errors or reactor failures. When a remote listening post on the edge of human space went dark, they dismissed it as a malfunction. Then they lost an entire warship. The Vraxel's Fang was a Drenthar battlecruiser, a vessel built to command respect and crush uprisings before they could take root. It had been sent to investigate strange readings near the Sol system, expecting to find little more than debris and forgotten ruins. Instead, it never returned. The Imperium sent a second warship, then a third. Each one disappeared. The losses were unacceptable. Earth was a prison world, a dead rock filled with exiles who should have torn each other apart centuries ago. And yet something was happening in the shadows, something the Imperium could no longer ignore. They gathered a fleet, a small armada of 5 warships, each armed with enough firepower to level a planet. This would be no simple reconnaissance mission. It was a show of force, a reminder that the Drenthar Imperium ruled the stars. Their ships arrived in the Sol system, weapons primed, ready to burn Earth to ash if needed. They expected a world of primitives, desperate survivors clinging to life in the ruins of their ancestors. What they found was war. The attack came in silence. No grand declarations, no threats, no demands for surrender. Just the cold, precise execution of a plan centuries in the making. The first ship, a Drenthar destroyer, lost power without warning. Its engines flickered, its shields collapsed, and within moments, a dozen human ships descended upon it like predators. They weren't sleek, elegant vessels like those of the Galactic empires. They were brutal, reinforced, covered in armor that had been pieced together from centuries of scavenged wreckage. And they fought without hesitation. Human boarding parties struck with terrifying efficiency. The Drenthar, expecting undisciplined brutes, found themselves overwhelmed by warriors who had spent generations perfecting the art of survival. They moved in teams, striking weak points, jamming communications, cutting power before their enemies even had a chance to react. One by one, the Drenthar warships fell. Some were boarded and captured, others disabled and left drifting. A few tried to flee, only to be hunted down by human ships that moved with surgical precision. Within hours, the armada was gone. 5 warships reduced to wreckage, prisoners, and salvage. For the first time in its long history, the Drenthar Imperium had suffered a total defeat at the hands of an enemy they did not even consider a threat. And Earth was just getting started. The Drenthar Imperium tried to hide its defeat. The destruction of their fleet in the Sol system was an embarrassment, an impossibility that should have never happened. They refused to believe that Earth, the prison world, the Forsaken Rock, had done this. There had to be another explanation. A rogue faction. A hidden empire lurking in the void. But silence was dangerous. Across the galaxy, whispers spread. Merchant guilds spoke of vanished Drenthar ships. Smugglers brought rumors of an unseen force striking from the shadows. Rebellious factions that had long been crushed under the Imperium's boot felt something they had not dared to hope for in generations. They felt possibility. For centuries, the galaxy had known only submission. The great empires ruled with absolute control, and any who defied them were erased. No rebellion had ever lasted. No uprising had ever succeeded. The rulers of the stars were unchallenged, until Earth. It began as small acts of defiance. A group of enslaved laborers on a mining world overpowered their Drenthar overseers. A colony of refugees in the Outer Rim refused to pay their imperial tribute. A band of mercenaries, once loyal to the ruling class, turned their guns on their former masters. None of them acted alone. In the shadows, unseen and unnamed, Earth moved. Captured Drenthar ships were repurposed and sent to aid insurgents. Weapons, designed by exiled engineers and built in secret shipyards, appeared in the hands of revolutionaries. Communication networks, once thought impenetrable, were hijacked by unknown agents. Rebellions that should have been crushed in days instead turned into wars. The empires were powerful, but they had grown comfortable. They had never faced an enemy like this. Humanity did not fight like the old rebellions. They did not send armies into battle with grand speeches. They did not seek open war against the full might of the empires. They struck from the dark. They chose the time, the place, the target. Every attack was precise, every strike designed to unravel the power of those who had once cast them away. The Imperium tried to retaliate. They launched counterattacks, dispatched fleets to crush the uprisings. But the moment they moved their forces, another attack struck where they least expected. The galaxy was no longer stable. It was burning. And at the heart of the fire was Earth. What had once been a prison world had become something far greater. It was a fortress, a command center, a world that had endured everything and refused to die. And now, for the first time in its long, brutal history, it was taking the fight to the stars. The rulers of the galaxy had thought Earth was a mistake long forgotten. Now they saw the truth. It was their reckoning. The Drenthar Imperium was crumbling. Their fleets were stretched thin, their worlds under siege. Uprisings that had once been easily crushed now burned across their empire, fueled by unseen hands. Entire sectors fell silent, their governors disappearing overnight. Military convoys were ambushed, warships sabotaged, supply lines severed. They had ruled the stars for millennia. But now, for the first time, they were afraid. And it wasn't just the Drenthar. The other great empires, the Vedran hegemony, the Zix Dominion, the Korethi Accord, watched the chaos unfold with growing dread. If the mighty Drenthar could fall, what hope did they have? They had always believed their control was absolute, that their fleets and armies were unchallenged. But Earth had shattered that illusion. The unknown force that had struck the Drenthar fleet was no longer just a rumor. It was real, and its reach was growing. The rulers of the galaxy gathered in secret, desperate to understand what was happening. Who was supplying the rebels? Who had the power to cripple an empire? Was it a rogue species? An ancient power awakening? The truth was worse. They were not facing an unknown civilization, not a hidden empire from the void. It was humanity. The exiles, the forgotten, the forsaken, the ones they had cast away like garbage. They had not died. They had thrived. And now they were coming. The first direct strike came without warning. The Drenthar fortress world of Xeric 7, a planet that had stood for thousands of years as an unbreakable stronghold, fell in a single night. Automated defenses were turned against their masters, planetary shields collapsed, and warships in orbit were taken over by unseen forces. When the smoke cleared, the world was no longer Drenthar. It was human. The attack sent shockwaves across the galaxy. This was not a rebellion. This was not some desperate uprising doomed to fail. This was a war. And the galaxy was losing. Panic spread among the ruling class. If Earth had the strength to take a fortress world, what else could they do? Had they built a fleet large enough to challenge the great empires? Were their forces already hidden among the stars, waiting for the moment to strike? The truth was worse than they imagined. Earth did not need vast fleets or overwhelming numbers. They had something far more dangerous: strategy. Every battle was chosen, every strike planned to weaken the empires from within. They did not seek open war, they sought collapse. The Imperium's leaders sent out desperate calls for alliances, pleading with their old rivals to unite against the human threat. But trust among the great empires was thin, and many wondered, if the Drenthar fell, who would be next? The war had begun, and humanity was just getting started. The Drenthar Imperium had ruled the stars with an iron fist for millennia. Now it was shattering. World after world fell, not to grand invasions or overwhelming fleets, but to precision, sabotage, and subversion. Human agents, trained in the brutal crucible of Earth's survival, infiltrated key locations. Generals vanished from secured bunkers. Orbital defense grids mysteriously powered down during surprise attacks. Factories producing warships suffered catastrophic failures. The Imperium's admirals, once confident in their dominion, found themselves fighting an enemy they could not see, could not predict, and could not outmaneuver. And worst of all, their own people were turning against them. The galaxy had suffered under the rule of the Drenthar for too long. The other species, beaten down and broken for generations, had never dared to hope. Until Earth. When humanity struck the Imperium, they did not just destroy, they inspired. They whispered secrets into the ears of the oppressed, delivered weapons to the hands of the enslaved, and showed rebels how to win battles before they were even fought. Entire planetary militias, once loyal to the Drenthar, turned their guns on their former masters. Slave races, bred for labor and servitude, rose in defiance. Drenthar officers, once unquestioningly obedient, began to desert, realizing their empire was doomed. The cracks in the Imperium became fractures, then the fractures became collapse. The Drenthar High Council, once filled with arrogant rulers who saw themselves as gods, now met in desperation. Their fleets were in retreat, their supply lines severed, and their greatest fortress worlds under siege. Reports flooded in from across the empire. Entire sectors had gone dark, claimed by an unseen force that moved through the void like a phantom. But then the final blow came. The fall of Drenthara Prime, the homeworld of the Imperium, the beating heart of its rule. A planet that had never known war, guarded by the most advanced fleets ever built. And yet, the humans were there. They had planned for this moment long before the first Drenthar ship fell. Decades of intelligence, years of preparation, and centuries of vengeance led to a single coordinated strike. Saboteurs embedded deep within the planet's security forces overrode the planetary defense grid. Elite strike teams emerged from within the capital itself, having infiltrated the world years before. As the Drenthar High Council screamed for their fleet to save them, they realized too late. There was no one left to answer their call. Drenthara Prime fell in a single night. The empire that had once exiled humanity, that had sentenced Earth to death, ceased to exist. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the greatest power among them crumbled. And at the center of it all, the humans stood victorious. But the war was not over. This was only the beginning. The fall of the Drenthar Imperium sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The unthinkable had happened. The rulers of the stars had fallen. Their fleets were shattered, their armies scattered, their homeworld burning. And humanity had done it. For centuries, Earth had been a forgotten world, cast away like garbage, left to rot in isolation. But in the darkness, humanity had not died. They had not faded into history. They had evolved. Now, they were no longer prisoners, no longer exiles. They were the new rulers of the galaxy. The other great empires trembled in fear. If the mighty Drenthar could fall, then what hope did they have? Some attempted to form alliances, desperate to unite against the human threat. Others chose submission, offering their fleets, their resources, and their worlds in the hope that humanity's wrath would pass them by. But humanity had no desire to rule as the Drenthar had. They had seen what absolute power did to civilizations. They had endured the cruelty of tyrants, the oppression of empires that saw them as nothing more than disposable. They would not become the same monsters they had destroyed. Instead, they reshaped the galaxy in their image. Worlds that had once been enslaved were freed. Races that had lived under imperial rule for generations were given back their independence. The iron chains of the old order were broken. But humanity did not simply walk away. They watched. They ensured that no empire, no race, would ever again wield unchecked dominion over the stars. The old rulers had fallen, and in their place, a new order had risen. One forged not in conquest, but in balance. And at its heart was Earth. No longer a prison, no longer a forgotten wasteland, but the homeworld of the species that had defied extinction. The Drenthar's throne world, once a symbol of oppression, was repurposed, not as a capital of conquest, but as the heart of a galactic council where all species had a voice, where no empire would ever rise unchecked again. Humanity had proven that no civilization was untouchable, that no empire could rule forever. The galaxy had learned a lesson that would never be forgotten. Earth was a prison once. Now we rule the stars, and we will never be forgotten again.